Welcome to this 10-minute town trail in which we shall have a look at Loughborough's Old Town, which is situated in the Churchgate area. It comprises a series of medieval buildings, and Loughborough's market, which was granted its charter in 1221, would have been held in the churchyard of the parish church until about 1285. Merchants would have met regularly to trade in the former Guildhall. There's a lot to see, so let's start our tour where Rectory Place and Steeple Row meet. Situated in a grassy area, the Old Rectory is the oldest of the few remaining stone-built edifices in Loughborough. Although Loughborough had a rector as early as 1193, the earliest written record of the building dates from 1228, when it was owned by the Courtlinsoke family, before being acquired by the church. Over time, the building has been altered and extended, and by the late Middle Ages, the prosperous merchant town of Loughborough provided a substantial residence for its rector and church officials, and, in addition, the grounds contained at least 3 barns, stables and pigsties. In 1800, Leicestershire architect Christopher Staveley undertook repairs and improvements. In 1826, a new frontage, facing onto Rectory Place, was added following a fire in the building. During the Victorian period, the extensive gardens were used for fetes and other fundraising events. Reaching the end of its life as a home for the local rector, the rectory was saved from complete demolition when what was then the Loughborough Archaeological Society investigated and recorded as much of the building's history as they could establish. Although by 1967 the majority of the building had been demolished, the medieval core was saved and restored. It is now a museum run by the Loughborough Archaeological and Historical Society and houses a collection of local artefacts and hosts a series of changing exhibitions. When we exit the rectory grounds, we turn left and following along Steeple Row until we come to the Church of All Saints with Holy Trinity, which is the parish church of Loughborough. It is likely the church is built on the site of a former Norman or Saxon place of worship. Some of the building certainly dates back to around 1330, while the tower was heightened and a clerestory added in about 1450. The church is well positioned on the highest point of the Old Town and was originally dedicated to St. Peter and St. Paul, then to All Saints, and now encompasses the Church of Holy Trinity. This large parish church has undergone various changes over the years, reflecting developments in religious beliefs, in fashion and trends, and in architectural styles. In 1815, Christopher Staveley made alterations to the church, which included erecting 3 galleries and resiting the pulpit. The box, pews and gallery were later removed, and in the 1860s, further remodelling was to a plan by Sir George Gilbert Scott, who, amongst other things, rearranged the seating and enlarged the east window. In the ensuing 100 years, a number of small changes have been made to the church, including a north side extension, a dedication in the floor of the bell tower to the local bell founders, who lost several family members in the First World War, and the creation of a chapel in honour of Thomas Burton, wool merchant and notable benefactor to the town. Major remodelling around 1960 has been followed over the last 50 years by further works, including renovation of the stonework by David Tarver, a local sculptor. In 2016, work culminated in the renovation and resiting of the magnificent First World War memorial. If we head towards the exit from the churchyard that opens onto Sparrow Hill, but stop halfway along, we will see a building to our right which is now occupied by Charles Lowe. It has been variously referred to as the Great House, the Great Hall, the Guildhall and the Lord's Place. It is believed the buildings date back to the 15th century and, like the Manor House nearby, the timber frame of the buildings have been encased in a brick and stuccoed front, although some internal timber is exposed. Despite its many additions and alterations, it appears that some of the building was constructed following a layout typical of a small medieval house with a hall and cross passage. As a Guildhall, this would have been the meeting place for members of the early merchants' guilds, like Thomas Burton, a woollen merchant who died around 1495. Members of the early craft guilds might also have met here, and their workshops may have been situated nearby. In 1951, when the boundary wall of the Guildhall was demolished and then rebuilt, the bricks were identified as being similar to those used in the building of Kirby Muxloe Castle, which had been built by the Hastings family, who were the lords of the Manor of Loughborough, so perhaps this building was also connected to that family. The inhabitants of the Great House might at one time have been staff from the Burton Free Grammar School, which was situated in the churchyard opposite, but since the mid-19th century the Lowe family of cabinet makers, antique dealers and furniture dealers have occupied the building. In the shop window is a proud announcement that King Henry VII once stayed the night in this building in 1486. Staying in the churchyard and turning to the left slightly, we see another building that Henry VII would have known. The 19th century white stuccoed frontage of the former Manor House creates a dazzling landmark in the Old Town centre. The Manor House, along with the park, its chapel, fish ponds and rabbit warrens, belonged to the Lord of the Manor of Loughborough and was constructed during the time the Hastings family were those lords, between 1464 and 1485. The rear of the building has visible post and panel timber framing, and archaeologists have dendrodated some timbers to around 1477. During the 16th century, an extension was built at right angles to the original building, and the attic also probably dates from this time. The east wing was built in the 17th century, and the frontage partially rebuilt in the late 17th or early 18th century. During the early 19th century, a further brick extension was added to the eastern side, and the building rendered and the thatched roof replaced by Switzerland slate. The house has had various owners and occupiers over time, including Thomas Messenger of the local company Messengers. During the census years of 1841 to 1901, the house was occupied by a variety of families. For most of the 20th century and into the 21st century, the premises have had a commercial use, being Putt's, a wallpaper and decorating shop, the business latterly situated on Nottingham Road, an electrical shop, a hairdressing salon and a bike shop. During a period of modernisation around 1950, an ancient fireplace, the weight of which was resting on an oak beam, was found on the first floor, a huge block of stone forming the lintel and side pilasters. The Manor House has since been converted, first into a hotel and now an Italian restaurant. From our position in the churchyard, further to our left, we can see the side of a building with the Windmill Pub. Can you imagine what this area might have looked like in the late 15th century? It would have been surrounded by meadowland, and the only buildings would have been the parish church, the Guildhall, the Manor House and the Rectory. But there would also have been a farmhouse, and it is believed that the windmill might originally have been a farm building, although not necessarily the farmhouse itself. If we exit the churchyard and walk towards the pub, we can see from its front that this is reputed to be the oldest pub in Loughborough. The outside was renovated in the 19th century, but inside there is still evidence of the crook frame in the roof, and apparently the timbers used still bear the mark of the original carpenter, dating it to around 1477. Like many such pubs, the Windmill was used as a meeting place for local groups. For example, in 1837, the United Guild of Druids met here. In 1940 until about 1955, the pub was used as a meeting place for the Buttonhole Club. This was a kind of social club for men, and woe betide any man who attended a meeting without wearing a flower in his buttonhole, as he would have to pay a forfeit. These forfeits were saved up and used to pay for an annual outing for the members. The meeting stopped for a while, but resumed in 1989, although the forfeits were then donated to Rainbows, the local hospice. A long-serving landlady, Doreen Heath, who was landlady from 1975 to 1989, was described in the local paper, the Loughborough Echo, as being one of the town's most colourful characters, as is the Windmill Pub. Our tour of Loughborough's Old Town is now complete, and you have only a short walk back to the starting point. Thank you for walking with me. I hope you enjoyed your whistle-stop tour, and I hope to see you on another 10-minute town trail.